The seizure of power by Burkina Faso's elite presidential guard loyal to the former president Blaise Compaoré, barely 3 weeks into presidential elections in that country, has been described by security experts as a potential recipe for serious violence. There are concerns this could escalate into full-scale war as violent protests still continue in parts of the capital, Ouagadougou. All land and air borders have been closed and a nighttime curfew imposed. So how is this likely to affect Ghana and the sub-region? Has the African Union and ECOWAS been proactive enough in helping Burkina Faso with its transitional arrangements? How should AU and ECOWAS respond to this crisis? My name is Stephen Nt, and this is today's big story. Right, before we go on, the Let My Vote Count Alliance has held a press conference a while ago, raising concerns about what they describe as the use of brute force by the police. In a statement, they said that we join millions of Ghanaians who have unreservedly condemned the exercise, arbitrary and brutish use of violent force by the police against armed protesters, even after they were dispersing as desired by the police. The press statement is long, but let's hear David Asante, the convener of the group.
Our message was the 2012 register must change. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, police officers clad in riot gear confronted a group of overwhelmingly young and peaceful protesters, including women and children, near the TUC. The public charged on armed protesters, ambushed us, and brutalized us using tear gas, batons, horse whips, rout shields, smoke grenades, and rubber bullets. We are currently piecing together all the information we can gather about yesterday's incident, including the allegation by a scientist who was an eyewitness, suggesting that the police used nitrous oxide, sleeping gas, as popularly referred to, on the protesters. Our plan is to mount a class action in court against the police for the violence that occurred at yesterday's event. How can the police or cabinet ministers justify such a naked, excessive use of violence by the police in a democratic Ghana today? This is what dictators do to their own people.
As David Asante, convener of the Let My Vote Count Alliance, will be exploring this much more on Joy News Prime at 7 with Israel Lai. Now, barely 3 weeks before elections are to be held in Burkina Faso, the most powerful armed group in that country has forcefully taken over in an apparent coup d'etat. A former chief of staff, Blaise Compaoré, General Gilbert Diendere, has been announced as the country's new leader. As overnight protests and violence continues in the capital, Ouagadougou, there are fears that this could escalate into a full-scale war. Let's go over now to the capital, Ouagadougou, and find out what the situation is there on the ground. Ghanaian resident there, Samuel Kwadwo, is joining us on the line. Mr. Kwadwo, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
So I know that this started early in the morning. What can you tell us how it has gone up to this time?
Well, the incident happened yesterday in the afternoon, around 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening, sir.
Yeah. We just heard on news that the whole thing started. The whole issue started that the late president Blaise Compaoré, when he was off, yeah, they came to make a law. They implemented a law that when they elect the new president, they are not going to allow any military personnel to guard the presidential area. It's only the police personnel who are going to guard there.
I see.
And in this case, when the military men also heard of this, they called for a meeting in the afternoon. So when they called for the meeting, they set everybody exclusive, including they should leave only the president and their prime minister. So they captured them. And this moment, we don't even know their life situation. They started shooting around 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, up to the morning. And so when the citizens heard of this, they went there to find out. They were not actually in comparison with them. So they said they are not d'accord with them. So they are not going to agree with the power of what these people are doing. They went there and they started firing at them. So we heard our news this morning, one person was dead and 60 people were injured.
Right. Yeah. So we also hear that there are protests and violent attacks on foreigners. I mean, you as a Ghanaian who lives in Ouagadougou, yourself and your other friends, are you feeling safe enough?
Well, for my area, I can say no one has been injured or been into any problem.
Okay.
And I've also called other places to inquire. They've also given the same information that there is no one in the problem. Right. They are all feeling well. That's why you cannot go outside or go to work.
Right. Thanks very much, Samuel Kwadwo, for that snap update. Samuel Kwadwo is a Ghanaian resident in Ouagadougou. So now, how could this play out in Ghana and the sub-region? We're getting onto the telephone line, security analyst and former executive director of the West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP, Emmanuel Bombande. He's joining us now. Good evening, Mr. Bombande.
Hello, good evening to you and good evening to your viewers.
Great. I know with your kind of background and experience, such an announcement of a coup in neighboring country, Burkina Faso, will be ringing alarm bells in your ears. How bad is this situation, especially considering that Burkina Faso is neighbors to Ghana?
You have described it very appropriately in the sense that it's a major setback that must not be allowed to even become worse. Keep in mind that the transitional arrangement leading up to the elections of October 11 was a process that Ghana led as our president was chair of the Authority of Heads of State of ECOWAS. That brokered a transitional process supported by the international community to ensure that constitutional rule is restored within the limits of what is acceptable in our dispensations at the ECOWAS level, at the African Union level. And to that extent, there has been a groundswell of support for this transitional arrangement to be successful. For Gilbert Dienderi, who is currently the coup leader, and his henchmen to perpetuate what they have done would be unacceptable. And for that matter, yes, it rings alarm bells, and it's for us obviously a matter of grave concern.
Now, the narrative we get on the ground suggests that the elite presidential guard is the most powerfully armed group in the country, and the fact that as part of the transitional arrangements, it was announced that the police will be given responsibility over the guarding of the presidency. This group felt threatened. How influential is the group really in Burkina Faso, and how does it look if they don't get the chance to be involved in the governance of the country?
I need to make a correction there. First of all, what they call the RSP, which is basically the presidential guard. They number about 1,200, and they are the best, if you call it, armed in terms of weapons. Now, it is not the transitional arrangement that talked about disbanding them, but the transitional arrangement included the processes of national reconciliation. And so a National Reconciliation and Reform Commission was formed. That commission submitted its report to the transitional president of Kafondo.
I see.
But in the meeting that the president was at, which was a cabinet meeting, we cannot confirm for certain that this was on the agenda. But it is strongly believed that the president, together with his ministers, was considering the recommendation of the National Reconciliation and Reform Commission. And the key recommendation was that what you have just said should prevail, that the police together with the gendarmerie will form a hybrid to take care of the presidential security detail. And the 1,200 members of the former presidential guard could then be integrated in the regular army, effectively banning the presidential guard. So that could be an immediate trigger in which the direct interest of this presidential guard now on the table of discussion could have precipitated. But that will not be the only. There will be a public knowledge of the inquest into how exactly former President Thomas Sankara was killed. And you know that some of these pushes are directly related in terms of the perception of the killing of Thomas Sankara.
That's right.
And their names then would have come out and they would have been implicated. So that's the second reason.
Right.
And the third, which is rather weaker but still relevant, is the fact that all the pro-Blaise Compaoré candidates through the Constitutional Court were removed from the list of candidates to stand for president.
That's right.
Effectively taking away their interest in the immediate future government of Burkina.
And that, Mr. Bombardier, that you say is a weaker point. That's interesting because we feel that what is happening is a demonstration of the influence of Blaise Compaoré in all phases of the Burkinabe system, society up to now.
I agree with you on that point that as long as he continues to be in our neighborhood, he is pulling the strings, he has a lot of influence, he has a lot of weight. The only reason why I described it the way I did was because the party of Blaise Compaoré and the associates of President Compaoré, the first thing they did was to try and mobilize the generality of society in Burkina Faso to agitate against the elimination of their candidates on the list of presidential candidates, but nobody bothered. They were not able to galvanize and mobilize any support, which means that the political context in the majority of people, particularly in the urban areas, was not for the inclusion of anybody associated with Blaise Compaoré. Though I would not say that would be true if you went to rural areas. And so it is a major factor, but then the reason why it could be as important as the first two is precisely because finally knowing that they could not mobilize a process that is understandably more credible, they thought this would be the way to go. But I think this is the worst mistake of Gilbert Diendéré, because now they have exposed themselves in a way that they will be held accountable for anything that would happen.
Right.
As it is beginning to as it continues to evolve.
Mr. Bombardier, we'll have you hold. I will return to you to discuss what we should be doing as neighbors. But Dr. Vladimir Ntwi Danso, Acting Executive Director of the Center for Local Governance Advocacy, is joining us now. Dr. Ntwi Danso, good evening.
Good evening.
Now, before we start our conversation, let me quickly read a statement that has been issued by the UN Secretary General just a while ago. The Secretary General, according to the statement, is outraged by reports of the detention of President Michel Kafando and Prime Minister Yakuba Isaac Zida of Burkina Faso, as well as number of ministers of state by the Régime de Sécurité, the presidential, I want to believe that it's a RSP in Ouagadougou. The Secretary General calls for their immediate release. The incident is a flagrant violation of Burkina Faso's constitution and transition. The UN stands firmly behind the transitional authorities and President Kafando. The Secretary General notes the strong support of the people of Burkina Faso for a peaceful transition and urges compliance with the transitional calendar, including the upcoming election. So, Dr. Ntwi Danso, does this coup d'etat really suggests that enough groundwork was not done to ensure that the transitional arrangements that were put in place were solid enough?
Precisely so. I have always said that when we stampede people in places where there is state failure, to go back to the ballot box within some months or say a year, we are making a mistake. The things that my brother Bombande was describing were real and are still real. The society has been polarized along the lines of Kampaore, Sankara dichotomy. And if you really want neutrality and you want the people to really go back onto their feet, it's not a question of saying, I don't recognize you, ECOWAS has that protocol, AU also has it, and then later on you come and sit with the very person who say you don't recognize. It's one a transitional arrangement. In the course of the transition, if things are going against you, if things do not neutrality, he runs at it. He has become a variable in the determination of the future of Burkina Faso. It happened in Guinea. It has happened in several other places. And if we really don't learn our lessons, as soon as the general wanted to step in when there was chaos, and this ML just gets up to say, you can't have it, we should have known that there is something to it. But if we didn't do anything and we are playing to the rules and regulations of international order, times are not normal there. So at the issue, we made a mistake of trying to see that the transition will go the way it has gone.
Let's get a fairer understanding of the roles ECOWAS and the AU are supposed to play in all of this. I mean, the UN Secretary General is sending Ibn Chambers, who is his envoy for West Africa, to Ouagadougou to start working closely with the ECOWAS in order to restore calm to that country. But shouldn't this have been done much earlier, and perhaps ECOWAS and AU getting more involved in the transitional arrangements before now?
You are very right. If you look at the Africa Peace and Security Architecture, it's been so well designed in a way that the use of the panel of the wise and the early warning system, if they were working, this wouldn't happen. If they were working, and again, for a long time, we have not been able to get the standby brigade. What are we waiting for? And then when these things happen, then we resort to the protocols that we have signed against the change of government and that sort of thing. So something should have been done long ago. We knew that something was brewing in Burkina, especially towards the election. The things that had happened, I knew that somebody was going to see that it was going to be done in, or when a new government takes over power, there was a possibility of, breaking the past. And that is why they have stepped in again. Something should be done. The early warning system has worked. It's not working. The use of the panel of the wise is not working. The brigades have not been formed. And somebody asked me in the morning whether I should expect more of this in Africa. We should expect more of this in Africa for as long as the system don't work. The system in Burkina Faso is personal, and because it is personal, we should expect this to work. But if it were very neutral, where institutions are working according to the remedy given them by the Constitution, and if they are not at the beck and call of any incumbent government, things will go the way they should go. Not respecting individuals who are working, but respecting states and their institutions.
Dr. Nchidanso, we'll have you hold briefly and bring in Bombande back into the conversation. Mr. Bombande, Dr. Nchidanso raised a critical issue of the early warning signals. Would you say there were enough warnings that should have guided ECOWAS and AU and even the transitional system arrangement in that country to ensure that what happened yesterday and today didn't start at all?
No, first of all, let me appreciate and share in the perspectives of my brother, Dr. Danso. The early warning alerts have always been there. We have consistently argued that when they do not correspond with an adequate early response, then a weakness is created institutionally that makes what we see evolving to happen. But keep in mind that the momentum with which the transitional processes were undertaken, so to speak, at the institutional capacity of ECOWAS, weakened over the last 2 months, to the extent, therefore, that even as we're building towards the October elections, and we're expecting to see a more rigorous engagement on the ground, you did not feel that was happening. And I regret to say this, but I thought President Macky Sall should have been paying more particular attention to how we can ensure that this transitional process is successful from the way and manner he took over from the role of chair from our president. But having made this observation, you just made a remark in your observation that His Excellency Dr. Ibn Chambers, head of the UN Office for West Africa, is going to go and leverage on the ground with ECOWAS and the African Union how we should move forward. The problem is that is the way it should be. But if you look at that institutional weakness of ECOWAS on the ground, it becomes difficult for that leveraging to happen.
No, Mr. Bombade, when you say institutional weakness of ECOWAS on the ground, is it to suggest that really the effectiveness of ECOWAS in the country is not felt, or are you referring to institutional lapses across the sub-region in general?
No, I'm talking about the there was a tweet. Dr. Ibn Chambers was in Ouagadougou as he sat in the meeting of the international support for the transitional process. Now, after that meeting, he made a tweet of himself and the director of political affairs of the African Union, and the caption was about how the UN and the African Union would continuously work in partnership to complete the transitional process. I was curious that ECOWAS was not part of that mention, which basically explains what I'm trying to draw your attention to. That ECOWAS must be a leader to be leveraged on the ground. And I'm not criticizing them necessarily, but what I'm saying is that that presence has been weak, and to that extent, therefore, it did not help to the extent that this gap has created what we are now seeing happening.
There are those also who say that the forceful takeover by the elite's guard could be a recipe for more violence and a possibility that this could escalate into a full-scale war in the sub-region as well. Do you see it that way? And should Ghana and the other neighbors be taking precautions of a sort?
I'm sure already the different governments in member states, and I'm sure absolutely that in our own case, the government of Ghana are pretty much aware that the potential for an escalation that could create a very insecure environment is plausible. And I'll not be surprised, therefore, that a lot of talking must be going on now in terms of how to effectively respond. Keep in mind, from when you started talking with me and Dr. Danso, you reported one dead. But in the past few minutes, that has been updated. I cannot confirm, but I hear that the number of deaths has increased. Now, if this was to continue, and the potential for it to continue is real, precisely because there is a resolve from society not to allow this coup to succeed. And since the Presidential Guard have weapons, should they decide the type of reprisals, that would be heavy-handed within the challenges that come along with such an attempted coup or a coup d'etat. These reprisals could lead to more deaths. It could lead to a serious situation that is not just a security value for Burkina Faso, but the rest of West Africa. And to that extent, we must be all prepared to deal with such a potential crisis.
Right, Mr. Bombande, we're grateful for your time. We still have Dr. Vladimir Nchidanso on the line. So, Dr. Nchidanso, I'll wrap up with you, and I need to find out from you what you think should be the international response, either whether it is from AU, from ECOWAS, or the international community. How should they respond to this crisis?
I think we should still judge. We must send eminent persons to go and work out an interim arrangement and make sure that this arrangement lasts. I know some hope might think that there must be an intervention. That shouldn't be. It's a non-starter. Because it will exacerbate the situation. Meanwhile, as Bombande and you have said, there is a possibility of escalation if you don't step in as quickly as possible to ensure that those who are taking up arms right now, the elite core of the Burkina Faso army, which is called the Presidential Guard,
they are so sophisticated, and that is why earlier on the general gave in. We must ensure that this guard is assured of some interim measures that would not lure them to any trap. If they are not assured of this, I tell you the reprisals are going to be very heavy. They are going to be heavy-handed on any attempt to make them the victim.
Mm. And I know that when these things happen on the African continent, it casts a certain image on the continent at large, even though there being stability recorded. There is stability recorded in several parts of the African continent. Isolated incidents of this nature usually tend to cast a negative image over all of us. Do you see that coming, or already have you spotted signs of the West, for example, stepping aside and waiting for us to take our own measures to resolve the matter first?
No, certainly the point is that the situation in Africa is that everybody knows that anything will happen at any time, even though nobody wants to do anything about it. Mm. Interventions will come only when they think that non-intervention would be detrimental to themselves, like the French intervention in Mali. If Qaeda and other people got the place as a haven, it will be more detrimental to the southern part of Europe, and that's why they came in. For our part, and we've always said that we need to build our institutions to be neutral, to be the governing institutions of the country. Why should Burkina Faso have a presidential guard so sophisticated than the rest of the army? Why should institutions be at the beck and call of the incumbent government? Why is it that in Africa leadership is always interested in vengeance policy? This is the case in Burkina. This is the case in very many places. And several other places. This is what is happening. So if we don't take our own destiny into our own hands and we expect interventions from outside, they will intervene, yes, bring some semblance of stability, and ask people to go to the polls. The source of the whole problem has not been dealt with. And we'll come back to for one.
Right, thanks very much, Dr. Vladimir Enchi-Danso. Dr. Enchi-Danso is acting executive director for the Center for Local Governance Advocacy. And you heard him that African nations should aim at building institutions that are neutral. My name is Stephen Enti, and that's where we draw the curtains for today's big story.